were both Texas products. These are some of the earlier hearts. As you can see, they were quite rudimentary, and this is a picture from the 60s in the Life magazine.
We were thinking of the heart as just a pump, and it seemed logical that if that's the main function, you ought to be able to duplicate that mechanically.
It seemed pretty simple, and it was pretty simple just to make a pump, but to make a pump that duplicated all the requirements of the mammalian heart was a different matter and proved to be quite a bit more difficult than we perceived. This was a lot of money in 1965, and Baylor was the primary source and benefactor of this grant. Dr. Liotta reported his work on the artificial heart at an OSIO meeting in 1961. Dr. DeBakey was much impressed by that, and Dr. Liotta was asked to come to Houston to work with Dr. DeBakey on the artificial heart and ventricular assist devices. As you can see, this is May of 1965. We still don't have a truly long-term artificial heart yet, but I think we'll see it in most of the professional lifetimes of the audience. The first, this was a historic first. This was the first patient that had a implantable LVAD. Dr. Liotta and Dr. Crawford performed this in 1963. Unfortunately, the pump seemed to work, but the patient never woke up. The pump, his heart failure resolved. You can see the pump only pumped about 2 liters. This is Dr. Crawford, who was also a great contributor in that field. The patient never recovered brain function and was pronounced dead 4 days later, but his heart failure did resolve. The first successful patient was this patient, who was a patient while I was on Dr. DeBakey's service, and I remember this is a typical patient of those days that had such an enlarged heart from severe chronic rheumatic heart disease. The pump was implanted into the left atrium and for the inflow, and to the axillary artery for the outflow, and was actually placed on the outside of the chest wall, as you can see here. And this very brave woman who went through this ordeal. And Dr. DeBakey, of course, had become very well known in public circles, and this was on the national television at the time. The patient did have the pump removed. Dr. DeBakey removed it in the ICU because he could just take the deaden the incision sites and oversew the graft. She lived another 8 years and died tragically in an automobile accident in Mexico. Now, Dr. Gibbon had performed the first successful open heart surgery in Philadelphia in 1953, a pair of an ASD and a woman who is actually my age and who is still alive. But the subsequent cases went very poorly. There were 19 cases subsequently, of which 3 were Dr. Gibbon's, and they all died. The first person to really have successful open heart surgery was Dr. Lillehei at the University of Minnesota, and he utilized cross circulation. That is, his impression of Dr. Lillehei is a great contributor to our field, and he used the parent actually as the oxygenator and the heart-lung machine. and was able to repair successfully complex congenital heart defects as open heart surgery at that time, before valves or before bypass, was basically congenital heart surgery. Dr. Cooley had trained with Dr. Blaylock, so when he came back to Houston, his hometown, he was also the only one that had any experience with the Blaylock Taussig shunts. So he actually had privileges at both St. Luke's and the Texas Children's, as they were one hospital at that time. Dr. Cooley and the pediatric cardiologist, Dr. McNamara, went to visit Dr. Lillehei in the fall of 1955. Dr. Cooley was very impressed with that visit, and he came back, and he and his brother-in-law made this oxygenator from a coffee maker that he got from a restaurant supply house. It was normally used for, it was a drip coffee maker, but you could also bubble oxygen and oxygenate blood and convert it to an oxygenator. And this was he utilized in April of '56. This was the first successful open heart surgery for a VSD following an acute myocardial infarction, a difficult problem even today. This patient survived, and Dr. Cooley began doing a lot of heart surgery. He was very successful. One reason, because the oxygenator was very damaging to the blood, so it had to be very quickly done. And you can see his pump time in this case was 7 minutes and 15 seconds, and a similar pump time on this case. By the end of 1956, he'd done 95 cases with 9 deaths, and he continued to do more heart surgery than